Welcome. This video is on the professional photographer's legal roadmap. It is TheLawTog, the go-to legal resource for photographers, giving you the big picture view of legalities into photography. Because friends, let's be real, it is overwhelming and sometimes it's a moving target because so many things can be changing. We are here. My name is Rachel Brinke. I'm the head of TheLawTog. So we, TheLawTog, is here to help you with your photography business and reducing the overwhelm. This will be a fairly quick video to walk you through the three major sections. This roadmap is going to dig you into the three major components of legalities of the photography business. Again, big picture. I am going to try to make it as fun as possible, which we know legal is not that fun all the time, but it is so incredibly important. Legal's not sexy, but let me tell you what is even less sexy is a lawsuit, is a chargeback, is client issues, is negative reviews, lack of referrals. All of that is not sexy. All those things that we want to avoid. So let's dig right in. Once again, my name is Rachel Brinke, and I just want to share before we dig into this. I am different than most attorneys out there. I was a photographer prior to being an attorney. I still do photography when the time allows. And what is so incredibly important too about the perspective that I bring is that I believe that entrepreneurship is a way of life, but it shouldn't be your entire life, right? So what we want to do is work to prevent issues so that it doesn't take time, money, and energy away from actually growing our business successfully and also living our life. You know, I have been an entrepreneur in different industries, whether it's brick and mortar, online, sales, services, products. I have been in my hands in a variety of things, but the thing that I've been throughout all of it is a human being that really values my life, right? So I am a lawyer, I have my MBA, I do business strategy consulting, written books, podcasts, I speak, all that good stuff. Most importantly, I'm a wife, I'm a mother of 5, I am a cancer survivor, so I take health very, very important, especially since I train with Team USA, and I love me some good Netflix. Why is this important? Besides you getting to know me as more than just a lawyer for photographers and the head of TheLawTog, is that my perspective that I'm going to give you in this big picture legal roadmap is not just because I'm a lawyer sitting in ivory tower pointing down and saying, these are the things you need. In fact, I'm bringing it to you so you can prevent issues as opposed to playing cleanup on aisle 4 later on. Because again, that's going to spend more time, money, and energy cleaning it up. Like a quick little example, if we dig into this, many times getting into business, I understand you may not have a lot of money to invest in legalities, but I've seen real cases over and over and over again where individuals, photographers get into business and they're like, I know I need a contract, but I just don't want to spend the money on it right now, right? Say I don't want to spend like $500, $600 on a good bundle of contracts like we're going to talk about in this video. And then they end up in a situation where their client does do a chargeback, or worse, the client takes them to court and they have to end up spending thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars defending it. And then what do they do in the end? These photographers still have to turn around and spend $500 or $600 or more on the contract they should have had in the beginning, right? So that's just one example to show you when I speak of these legal tools and things that you need to be a really solid, legally protected business. It's so that you can prevent issues, because you are going to end up spending a lot of money. You're going to spend a lot of time with me on the phone helping you to clean it up, because I also have my law firm separate from TheLawTog, so I do a lot of this work, especially in copyright infringement, like we're going to talk about. But friends, I really want you to be growing your business and focusing on marketing, and you can't do that if you're cleaning up issues that could have been prevented. So let's move on. The fine print of this, I am a lawyer, but I'm not your lawyer. I run TheLawTog. I am licensed in multiple states. My virtual law firm is actually international. So we have representatives that work with us in multiple states, as well as Canada, Australia, and a couple other countries. So if you want to work with me individually or anybody on my team, just reach out through TheLawTog on the contact page or jump into our Facebook group and we'll send you to the right direction. But all of this information in this is going to be general legal information for education only. Always please consult legal counsel. And like I mentioned so far, You never have an issue until you have an issue. And having the mindset of that'll never happen to me, whatever horror stories I bring up in this, or what you see on Facebook, or what you hear from others, that is one of the most expensive mindsets you can have. I just gave you the example of like not wanting to spend $500 on contracts, spending $10,000 in court and winning, but not getting that money back because you didn't have a right contract in place, and still having to spend the $500 anyways, and all that time and energy. So we don't want to do that. So the big picture of what we're going to be looking at for this legal roadmap, which by the way, I have created this after, and I may fine tune it in the future, but these are the consistent big picture topics that photographers need to be aware of. I have presented at Creative Live. I have my online business course was the first online course at PPA, Professional Photographers of America, that allow for certification points for y'all to get towards your certification levels. And I say all that humbly, but I say that to say I have individually done legal services. I've done it on a broad scale. I've done it at conferences. I have helped thousands of photographers. And this information is the common theme that I see. So what's interesting about the position that I'm in as a lawyer is I'm to bring to you, you don't know what you don't know. So I'm there to help fill the gaps, but you also all have your questions. And this kind of all came together, and this is the big picture here. So here are the three main buckets that we're going to go over. Legal business setup. This is protecting your photography business with the proper legal setup, such as your entity, tax compliance, permits, licenses, and even more. In fact, the solution that we have on legal biz setup, if you don't want to go out and find an attorney, especially if you're not able to find one that really understands the photography business, there are some, and many of the attorneys that work, and actually all the attorneys that work with me, I've debriefed, I work with them so they understand the photography industry. But if you're not wanting to go that route, we have our Get Legit education portal that allows for you to get step by step of how to do legal business setup and the things that you need. Now, keep in mind, when it comes to legal business setup in the United States, the bare minimum really honestly is making sure that you abide by any local jurisdictional requirements, such as a business license or a permit. There is no real legal requirement to be like an LLC or corporation or any other entity. We just strongly recommend that, and we talk about that all in Get Legit. But the other side is that you must pay your taxes as well. So the actual legal business setup portion is fairly quick and easy, relatively speaking, right? So, but just because those are the things that are only legally required, it isn't what we fully recommend for legal protection. The second major tool is contracts, which is probably what you're watching this video primarily for, is on all the contract levels. There are going to be 4 main contract levels that we're going to go over. So just be mindful when you say like, oh, my photography contract. There's actually upwards of 50 photography contracts, because photography contract is an overarching umbrella term. You're probably referring to a services contract, which we'll dig into here in a little bit in more specificity, but just know that there's all sorts of contracts, and we'll walk through the timeline on that. And third, we've all heard about it probably, copyright. We are so unique as photographers because we are doing more than just selling services and products. We're actually selling intellectual property, which is protected by what? Copyright law. So we want to protect our photography, set ourselves up for success for when infringement happens, because remember, you never have an issue until you have an issue. So this is what our professional photographer's legal roadmap download looks like. And if you haven't downloaded already, make sure you snag it as soon as possible. You can get it on the front of the site at thelawtog.com/roadmap. It is free. You'll get the download. Or if you are in Get Legit, our educational membership, absolutely so much fun with the students in there. You'll have it there to download as well. Just to walk through some of the contents and such, we talked about big picture a little bit. I'm going to dig into each of those 3 a bit more. And I've already given you the introduction to me, but that is me in the picture right there. I'm a big fan of ripped jeans, nose ring. Like I said, I'm not the typical attorney you're going to meet. I dress a little better when I go to federal court for copyright infringement stuff, of course, but really, friends, I am like you. I am in the trenches. I understand the pain points of what you're going through, and I just really want you to not have to feel the heaviness of legality. I would rather you come to me, whether it's at the TheLawTog or through my law firm, of us being able to have a fun conversation, have coffee together via Zoom, and work on the things to prevent. Because one of the great things too about me, I kind of dropped this little nugget previously, and I say great in that I'm not necessarily just saying this about myself. This is the feedback that I get from many of you all, is that because I have the business strategy and the MBA side of me, I've been doing consulting actually way longer than I've been an attorney or a photographer, is that when I provide legal information, as you're going to see when we walk through this, it's also business strategy. What works with consumer psychology? What builds up their buyer's confidence? What prevents issues? What, lessens the impact of certain things? So that's what we want to go through. Big picture, we've talked about this already. It's easy as 1, 2, 3, legal biz setup, contracts, and copyright. And I kind of mentioned it a little bit before. Legal business setup, again, the bare minimum requirements in most jurisdictions of the U.S. are just having a license, which is a permission to do business. This does not mean that a license equals LLC, limited liability company, or corporation. I see that in groups a lot, even in the TheLawTog group, and we try to correct it. Those are LLCs and corporations are entities. That's entity creation, as you can see, is number 1 on this quick list here. That is not a license. A license would be the permission to do a specific activity in a certain area, right? So legal business setup, the bare minimum is either is going to be taxes and the licensing, like we just talked about. But here's a good little overview you can see of the legal biz setup, and this is super high level. Again, remember, we're just big picture here. If you dig into the Get Legit educational membership, or we even have, if you don't want to go the membership education route, we have the Ultimate Legal Checklist bundle that walks you through all the items that you need to do. It's what, not the how, whereas the education has the how for you in there. But why I think it's important that you, as photographers, the head of your business, knows this information and not just blindly pass it off to a lawyer. Well, one, I've already mentioned that many lawyers don't work with photographers. They've never been photographers. They may not understand all the moving pieces. 2, not all lawyers are knowledgeable of intellectual property. And what that is copyright and trademark stuff. Again, we are selling photographs, right? Whether we're licensing or we're conveying the copyright ownership, our end product is intellectual property. Whereas many businesses just have like the intellectual property of their business name and their logo. We have all of that plus what we're selling. So many attorneys also don't understand intellectual property. So that's why it's incredibly important, if you're going to dig into finding a local attorney, that you make sure they're knowledgeable in the photography industry, they're knowledgeable in intellectual property. But this right here, I want to equip you as the head of your business. No matter how good of an attorney that you get, you still want to make sure that you have requisite information. So you can see on the list here, proper entity creation, the types of taxes, because in the U.S. we're looking at not just federal income, we're looking at self-employment tax, sales tax, maybe franchise or excise tax, depending upon where you live. Retirement and insurance, selecting proper insurance, right? There's liability, there's equipment, there's workman's comp, there's short-term disability, long-term disability, key person insurance, inland marine, all sorts of different types of insurance, and then retirement options there as well. And then I already mentioned intellectual property, but marketing legalities. It is true, you can market illegally. There are requirements that the Federal Trade Commission requires that you abide by. There are state trade and advertising. And I'll tell you what, friends, if you have not keyed into marketing legalities, then you need to put that on your to-do list, right? I'm putting these in order. And the way that we do it on the Ultimate Checklist and in Get Legit is that we walk through the priority order, right? We start with like the basics of entity creation, getting taxes and the retirement and insurance stuff like under you, and then moving on to marketing legalities. But the thing is, if you don't have any sort of understanding of what I'm saying, when I say marketing legalities and trade practices and advertising stuff, you need to dig into that. And we have all that information because so many states are cracking down on a variety of things. One, advertising, trade practices, and two, also sensitive data, consumer protection, consumer data information, like with use of privacy policies, if you're using pixels, etc. So incredibly important. And then, of course, so why do we even want to legally set up? Because we want to stay out of hot water by the government, first of all. But then we also want to make sure that we are legally protecting ourselves, such as by our entity choice, separating out our personal from our business assets. Even if you rent and you don't own a car, guess what? You still have a personal asset. You have income earning potential. That is a personal asset that you want to have separated from any potential claims that your clients may have. Because just because you may never pursue a client on something doesn't mean that they will never try to pursue you. And you just never know. And so we always want to have all the cards in our hands that we can play with later if we need to, should the time come. And that's why we want to get legally set up. So, of course, like I mentioned, how can you get set up? You can seek the counsel of a local attorney. I've given you the checklist for that. We have Get Legit. We have the ultimate checklist. And then, of course, we have the free Facebook group that myself and my team are in there. We love, absolutely love. I think actually the Facebook community is one of my very favorite resources that we have, because we're able to provide you with so much information and direct answers, and you get to hear real life examples, not just from me, but from other photographers who have gone through this as well. All right, so let's move into the contracts roadmap. This looks like a lot here when you're looking at it. So actually, let me put this on single page for you. All right. Remember earlier that I said you're probably referring to photography contract and you're thinking like one singular document. You're thinking like the agreement that your clients sign, and that's all there is, right? So essentials is what we call it. There's three main essential contracts that we want you to have in your photography business. This includes the services contract, print release, and model release. The services contract is going to be the one that's between you and your client. Well, actually, all three of these are, but this is the one that creates the legal relationship. It's going to set up the contractual obligations between you and the client, such as they're going to pay you X amount of dollars and you're going to provide A, B, and C services or products. Right? So that is the services contract. That is the key one that most people talk about, and just stop there. But you're going to be so educated after this. You're going to be able to go to photography mixers and be like, I know there's 4 levels of contracts that you actually need to have a fully protected legal business. But I mean, you may not do that. Be a little nerd alert if you do go, I do that. So if you ever see anyone at a mixer, that's me talking about this stuff. But services contract, most important, and even more important to have it niche specific. Like, don't use a wedding contract for newborn photography. Like, you're going to have stuff about posing of a newborn that is irrelevant to the wedding contract, and wedding contract may have stuff about the wedding timeline and rehearsal or reception. Well, that's irrelevant to newborn photography. So always look at having a niche specific services contract so that you're not cluttering your contract with ambiguities and confusion, because you also want to approach contracts with the mindset of, this is not just a legal tool that we're using to protect the photographer and to protect the client, because it's having both of you putting some skin in the game, but it is also setting expectations, right? The way that I draft contracts, and by the way, there is not any like legal set, have to do yada, yada, yada. This comes first, that comes second, this comes third. It's writing a contract is really an art form. And the way that I have developed over these years of working with thousands of photographers and, reviewing other contracts from other quote unquote contract shops, I find that we want to fulfill this role of contracts being more than legal tools, we want to use it to increase the confidence of our client and set expectations at the same time. It is more comfortable for the photographer and more comfortable for the client when you go in like a chronological order. So for example, one of the very first things in your contract when you get into the provisions would be talking about like how to get booked, then how the session's going to go, what happens after the session, so on and so forth. So it almost mirrors your workflow. So incredibly important to have it written in a consistent way like that. It's easier for human beings to understand chronological time frame. It helps to either have the client ask questions then before you guys get into the relationship together, or for you to educate the client on what the workflow is going to be, not just of signing the contract, but the entire relationship. So incredibly important to have a services contract all the time. Another document that's sometimes included in a service contract is the model release. This is the client giving you, the photographer, permission of the client's publicity rights for use in photographer's marketing. So basically, Susie is giving you, the photographer, permission to utilize her face in your marketing, for lack of a better term. All right, so publicity rights are state rights in the U.S., and some states have more restrictions than others. But it's a good way to just set the expectation that, hey, Susie, I'm going to be utilizing your face in marketing. Do you give me permission? And she does or does not. And then the last document is going to be our print release. And this is a personal use license from the photographer to the client. Photographers retaining copyright ownership. Industry standard right now, but there's other options later on down the line we can talk about. But for the most part, it's photographer retaining copyright ownership and extending a license of personal reproduction use to the client. All right, so these essentials contracts, services contract, print release, and model release. If you're doing anything like commercial, you're going to have commercial variations of these. Commercial meaning headshots, product photography, marketing photos of like a restaurant or taekwondo dojo. Those types of things are going to fall under commercial. This is really if you have a couple, you have a family, you have an individual that's coming to take photographs of themselves, and they're going to be utilizing it for only their personal use, like Christmas cards, hanging above the fireplace, that sort of thing. Then after that, we want to look at any sort of additional sales that were not necessarily contemplated in the initial services contract. So you're looking at doing like in-person sales, whether it's physically in person or by Zoom or just online type of sales session, having like final sale terms so there's no changes and you end up on the short end of a situation where you order the products, you're out those costs because then the client wants to cancel. So having final sale terms in there. Credit card authorization form if you need. This is good for a backup. It's in compliance with requirements for holding sensitive data such as credit card information, but you may want a credit card authorization form even if you're using an online system like Square or Stripe and those sort of things, just as a backup, especially if you have someone on a payment plan, which also in sales you can have a payment plan contract. Again, this payment plan is connected to anything that was not contemplated in the initial services contract. So services contract could be just straight for your session fee and you have a sales session later, or it could have a collection and then the sales bundle, this is the second level of contracts that we're talking about, like that payment plan and the sales level is going to be connected to additional purchases if you want to offer payment plans, but definitely having the final sale. And one of my favorites out of the sales level is the product delivery acknowledgement, and because we kind of want to tie up any loose ends. So if you're going to deliver beautiful big wall art, nice albums in digital files on maybe like a thumb drive or anything of that nature, you kind of want to have something to cover yourself that says client has inspected all of these products and they're good, sign off, blah blah blah, we're good to go. So there's not a situation that maybe as soon as you close the door and you walk away, client drops album on the floor, it dings the corner, and all of a sudden they're asking for you to replace it in whole, because then you're out the cost again. Now let's put a timeout here for a second. And I think this is something incredibly important that I did not include in here that I kind of want to back up just a little bit. Contracts, customer expectation setting tools like we talked about. They are legal protection tools. But I think even more, we just have to understand that they can also be customer service. We can be customer focused, right? So we do all the things to hold the cards in our hand if we need to play them, know what our legal foundation is. Once we know that, we can go above and beyond. For example, like in your services contract, let's say you take an initial non-refundable payment. We're not going to get into the whole deposit retainer discussion here. And then you're going to have a client pay maybe the other 50% 30 days out from the event or the session. And you want to put in there something, and all the LawTog contracts have this, of like what a late fee amount would be. Well, guess what? One, late fees are state regulated, so you would need to know what that max is. But two, just because it's in there doesn't mean you necessarily have to enforce it. We have it drafted in such a way that it safeguards you, the photographer. If you're having to chase down another payment, well, first we want to have a boundary, right? We want to make sure that client understands there's a quote unquote consequence if they don't pay, because we want them to pay on time. But two, if you're having to administratively chase down a payment, you should be compensated for that time in some form or fashion, and that would be pretty much done with a late fee. You can't assess a late fee unless it was contractually agreed to, all right? So you've contractually agreed to it in the services contract and the essentials bundle, like we talked about here, this first one on the list that you can see on the screen. But the good thing is, if you want to be customer focused, let's say maybe tragically a family member died, or they ended up sick, or you just simply want to offer customer service, just because it's in your contract saying that you could assess a late fee doesn't mean you have to, but it's there if you need to and want to. All right. So essentials contract bundle is going to cover the core of the session itself. Then we've got the sales bundle. And here's a good client timeline, kind of visually, chronologically, for you to look at how it goes. Main contract and model release gets signed to get booked, as well as that initial non-refundable payment. You have your session, your event, you do your sales order, and then your print release is going to be delivered with any digital files, which is, again, the personal license for use. And so this first block shows you, and this is chronological, right? This is where the client comes in the door on the left, and this is where the client and the relationship is fairly going to end, which it doesn't fully end, but these get into more of like how to leverage your clients in your relationship that you've wonderfully created for testimonials and referrals and such, and the legal protections for that. But just for like the main core of what you're doing with your clients, this left-hand side is like when the client inquires, you get main contract, model release done, you have the session, sales, print release, and then you kind of move into this sales bundle. If you're going to utilize like payment plan, final sale terms, delivery acknowledgement, you have the delivery, and that is fairly the end of your initial legal obligation to one another. So again, the first two levels of the big picture of contracts: essentials, this is where the bulk of you all will sit, and then sales, if anything that I've mentioned has been attractive, you're like, ooh, I know, I want to protect the sales, I'm doing in-person sales, or I'm doing high monetary quantity, by the way, sales, then that's incredibly important. Now going in to, we have other marketing stuff that we want to look at. Actually, marketing is going to be the third level. And there's 3 different marketing. I skipped over this one because I want to logically go here. Going back to the client timeline, we've got the essentials, then we've got the sales. Then after that, logically, is going to be how are you going to leverage the marketing relationship, or the relationship for marketing going forward, right? So the next you want to look at is the marketing bundle that's tagged for website and social. And this doesn't neatly just fit in this timeline. You could look at getting this marketing one under your belt ahead of time, because like we mentioned previously, the FTC, Federal Trade Commission, and states are really cracking down on the way that we track and gather potential client and client data, what we do with that. So in a marketing bundle that we have tagged as website and social, you would have website terms, privacy policy, and then also like a testimonial permission form, like to publish publicly testimonials or feedback that your clients give. So marketing, website, and social, incredibly important. If I had to pick anything on this list, let's say you are solo photographer and you may not be doing sales sessions yet, and you're not outsourcing it, at a minimum, you would need to get the essentials like we talked about, and then this marketing, website, and social. Those are like the first two real key things that I want you to look at having. But the other marketing ones to consider is also if you're going to do a collaboration. This is good for styled shoots, bartering, business referrals, like business networking, things like that. That we have a collaboration bundle list of that, and then also a portfolio one. This would be like if you're doing model calls, etc. And of course, I'd be remiss if I did not include the information about outsourcing. Deciding to outsource business tasks is an incredible way to leverage and grow your business. You're going to be like assistant work, editing, or even hair and makeup artist. It needs to be legally outlined, and you're going to have a services contract between you and this individual, whether they're a contractor or an employee. You also want to have like non-solicitation of clients. You don't want a second shooter or an assistant soliciting your clients, especially if they're a photographer themselves, right? These are clients you work to get in the door. And so non-solicitation agreement with this provider, whether it's a contractor or employee, you can legally protect yourself, but you also set the expectation for them not to solicit. You also want them to keep all information that they gather in the course of the business with you as confidential. And probably most importantly, if you're hiring like virtual assistants, second shooters, or people that are creating either content, social media posts, blog posts, editing photographs for you, editing video, you want to have them sign over all intellectual property rights so that your business owns all the intellectual property that's being sold to clients, is being used in marketing, or at least have a license. But if you're hiring someone to create something for your business, it really is appropriate for you to have that signed over to you, because in the US, especially if they're a contractor, by default, the independent contractor retains the copyright ownership, which we're going to get into copyright here in a minute. So I just always recommend on the outsourcing level to have that intellectual property acknowledgement when the outsourcer, a photo editor, assistant, etc., is onboarded, so they understand that all that intellectual property is being signed over to you. Now, again, remember, the mindset will never happen to me almost guarantees that it will, and it will be a very costly mindset for you, and I don't want that for you. Now, guess what? We are almost to the end here. It was a bit heavy in information, but I really want you to see that the high level things that you need and why it's so incredibly important. So let's dig into copyright. Again, copyright is the legal mechanism for ownership of photographs or other creative assets such as videos, logos, etc. And it is important to all entrepreneurs, especially photographers. And we talked about this because we sell intellectual property. All of us need to be aware of why and how to register our photographs, contractual implications of including copyright retention or conveyance to a client. So we mentioned this very briefly when we were talking about essential services contract. Industry standard for personal portraiture or like weddings and stuff like that is that the photographer retains copyright, and you do until it's either you are hired as an employee by someone else or it's conveyed away by contract. And so industry standard is that photographer retains that copyright, and we're extending a license. If it's commercial, like headshot or a product, we have a commercial license. If it's personal portraiture, like we mentioned, for personal use, it's going to be use of a print release. Now, copyright conveyance, there are important times when it is utilized for conveyance. Being a copyright buyout is the term that's thrown around a lot. And there's this mindset in the industry that if anyone asks that, they disrespect your work, but that's not always the case, especially in commercial work. It's really large companies, if they're hiring you or they're wanting to buy a copyright from you, is not so much because they disrespect your work, but they want control over the work for multiple reasons. One, they may want like exclusive branding for themselves. And if you, the photographer, retain copyright, you're the owner. You could go out and license it elsewhere, right? Now, the other level of it is that large corporations simply just do not want to have to deal with rights management. What this means is if they're hiring, because you're probably not the only photographer, but if they are hiring multiple photographers, acquiring intellectual property from different type of creators, photographers, videographers, etc., they don't want to have to spend the time, money, and energy to making sure that they're abiding by all the rights that they are required to in a license, and potentially end up in a copyright infringement suit. And so just I share that information before you dig into this, and we do have a separate copyright guide thelawtog.com/copyright guide, and it's free. And there's a whole video there. I don't want to burden it too much here for you. But if you want to go and hear a lot more about copyright, there's a 45-minute video from me where I get really, really deep into this information. Just understand that copyright buyout is super common in commercial. It's appropriate in some personal situations, but also just understanding what copyright is at common law, plus why registration is important. And then we also have a ultimate copyright kit that has even more enhanced videos to explain all of that. But most importantly, for when infringement happens, because it's not if it will happen, it will be when it happens, because people are taking photos and using it as their own all the time, even photographer to photographer. But that copyright kit has a demand letters, it has invoice, and it really gives you the skeletal structure that you need to try to pursue infringers, especially if it's too cost prohibitive for you to go to an attorney. Now, my law firm does a lot of copyright infringement work, but we're also very upfront to tell you, hey, we're willing to take your money, but here's the likelihood of success. Probably not a lot, and here's why. Like, we're super honest about that, because we find it, well, we're very particular about the cases that we take, because we're not in a space where just to take money. My goal is really here at the TheLawTog and at my law firm that's separate to be able to provide the services for proactiveness, like we talked about at the very beginning, but also to be there to help defend your rights, but to really do it when it's going to have a return for you, right? That's incredibly important. So we vet our cases, and we'll be honest to you. So if you just ever have a question, you're like, you know what, I just want an attorney to handle this to me, just shoot the information over to us. We're happy to look at it, and we'll be honest with you of whether, what the probability is, and we'll leave the decision up to you. But if it's, you're like, I don't want to deal with lawyers, blah, 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 or maybe we tell you it's just not worthwhile to have an attorney handle it for you, this ultimate copyright kit that we have is one that can really assist you with that as well. So that is the big picture. This was a little longer than I expected it to be, but I think it's incredibly important that you really see the big picture of everything that you need to have for your business. So just a quick recap: legal business setup, the 4 levels of contracts, which are essentials, sales, the ones in marketing and outsourcing, and then making sure that you understand copyright. Please do not wait until your photographs are stolen to decide to figure it out. Go watch that free video now and really dig into understanding what it is, because again, it's not going to be if it happens, it's going to be when, and it's on all these levels, right? Number 1, you think you're not going to get caught by the government. You may not right now, but you end up having a situation with your client, they're going to raise heck about it, right? They're going to point to, if you end up in a situation, they're going to point to how you're not following legalities. Same for number 2, if you're not using contracts yet, tell you what does it hurt? If nothing else, if I haven't convinced you, what will it hurt? I'm going to tell you what, it's not going to hurt anything. It's going to build up buyers' confidence. It's going to make you look more professional. It's going to set expectations. It's going to qualify out clients that are maybe not clients that you want to have, right? You get to see the red flags at that point. But at the end, it's also going to give you more confidence. And at the end of the day, it's going to legally protect you. And third, copyright. While we may have copyright protections at common law in the U.S. when we create the photographs and publish them, however, that is not enough. The landscape of copyright is very much against creators right now, and so we have to do the things. Again, we're playing cards. We want to put as many cards in our hand as possible so we can play them if we need to. If you all need anything at all, please feel free, reach out. Look at that face. I am not scary. I am just like you. I am in this. I understand the pain points. I have so much knowledge. There's way more that I wanted to put in this, but this video is way longer than I expected it to be. I just really want you to be legally protected, and I want you to get legit.